Okay, so this story is pretty fascinating. Now, this is a response from China. Now, China is obviously an X factor here because, China and Russia, I don't want to say have like great relations or anything like that. I don't think China and Russia have really had like great relations since like, maybe like the days of early days of Mao. But remember that China and Russia really split off, especially, as Russia moved away from communism, and then China and Russia, hated each other for a long time after that. Even when like Russia was invading Afghanistan, China was like, dude, fuck off. You're getting even closer to our borders. So they haven't had really all that great of relations. But recently they've kind of warmed up to each other a bit. Russia is a bit like China's child. Russia's economy is like 1.7 trillion GDP. It's really, really embarrassingly low. China's like 21. Obviously, China has, one something billion people. But China is a very, very powerful economy, right? So it says China's state banks restrict financing for Russian commodities. So now what we are seeing here is an interesting response from China, where this is not like any clear way, one way or the other. And they're the X factor here because we know how the European Union is going to respond, although it seems like some countries like Germany and others are responding in different ways than we thought. But China is a major X factor here because they don't like, America. I think they have like a reasonable relationship with the EU. I mean, they depend upon the US and the EU for their economy. Obviously, they need people to buy their, cheaply created stuff. And so if the EU and them stop, purchasing that, then that's a big, obviously income stream for them, right? So it says at least two of China's largest state-owned banks are restricting financing for purchases of Russian commodities, underscoring limits of Beijing's pledge to maintain economic ties with one of its most important strategic partners in the face of sanctions by the U.S. and its allies. This Industrial and Commercial Bank of China offshore units stopped issuing U.S. dollar-denominated letters of credit for purchases of physical Russian commodities ready for export. Two people familiar with the matter said Yuan-denominated letters of credit are still available for some clients, subject to approvals from senior executives, the people said, asking not to be identified, discussing private information. So, that's what it's saying Industrial and Commercial Bank of China offshore units stopped issuing U.S. dollar-denominated letters of credit for purchases of physical Russian commodities ready for export. So, I guess they're not using the U.S. denominated letters for credit, but they're still going to use some Yuan-denominated letters of credit. So, that is a kind of nuance there that maybe China is making some kind of maneuver that'll benefit them. But it seems more and more like it's an issue going on. It says the lender is yet to receive explicit guidance on Russia from Chinese regulators, so that's pretty interesting. But there's an issue here for Xi Jinping in China, and here's actually what it says. It says China's four largest banks have complied with previous U.S. sanctions against Iran, North Korea, and even top officials in Hong Kong because they need access to the U.S. dollar clearing system, a person familiar with the matter said. In a phone call with Vladimir Putin on Friday, Xi urged the Russian leader to negotiate with Ukraine to defuse tensions. So, this is a dangerous gamble even for China. Like, they're not just straight up chilling in this because with all the EU and US sanctions, they have to really comply with these because not only is it a big revenue stream for them, remember, they are really dependent upon a higher US currency because they want to create stuff for cheap at home with their lower yuan, and that's why they buy, they have some US debt because that'll that'll bolster their currency. If there's a bunch of outstanding debt that nobody has bought from the US government, it's going to make it look like they're more likely to default. Currency will be worth less. So they buy up some of the currency, it bolsters the US dollar and it lowers their yuan. They get to create stuff for cheap at home, and then when they sell it for USD, they make lots and lots of yuan, right? Because the conversion rate is so high, the money is so high. So this is a big thing. So it says Chinese financial institutions take sanctions compliance seriously, said Ben Kostrewa, foreign legal consultant at Hogan Lovells in Hong Kong, formerly handled U.S.-China disputes and negotiations at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. They don't want to be sanctioned themselves. They can't lose access to U.S. dollar transactions. So they're going to have to think about it very seriously, whatever the geopolitical impact might be. And so that's what it comes down to ultimately. They don't want to lose access to those U.S. dollar transactions They don't want to lose those, income streams from the EU and the US, and so they have to kind of tap dance here in trying to like balance themselves between the two sides because they're dependent upon the Western world ultimately to buy their stuff. And then Russia, outside of some geopolitical maneuvers, I'm sure like that's your potential buddy essentially. That Russia is your buddy. But also, there is the issue of Russia being like Russia is really influential in terms of its energy sources in the area. Like dumbass Germany, like closed all their fucking nuclear plants, and have moved away from nuclear, and they're now like dependent upon this Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline from Russia. It's a complete joke, right? So a lot of those neighboring countries are really dependent upon Russia for oil because they have so much of it naturally. So that would be like the only issue they could run into. But I think ultimately for China, the most important thing is just not losing access to those USD transactions. But I would say like this isn't like a clear response in any way. I think ultimately they don't want this. I had definitely thought the idea was going to be like, oh, they take Taiwan in response to the Ukraine situation, but actually they seem to have taken the opposite stance. China's saying Taiwan is not Ukraine because Ukraine really is like its independent country, right? They're trying to say like, no, Taiwan is not Ukraine. That's why we can take it over because they don't want to support breakaway, Donetsk and Luhansk regions. So, that's I guess something that they're actually taking the other side. I thought they were going to do the opposite, like, oh, we have the right to take Taiwan, just like Russia has the right to take Ukraine. So I was surprised that China's doing that. But I wouldn't say it's like a super clear response, but they don't seem to be really. I think behind closed doors, they're not in favor of this because I just don't see how this helps China in any way. I just don't. Like, it's too dangerous to deal with these sanctions that are being levied. EU's a big trading partner, huge trading partner of yours, US, huge trade partner. And more importantly than trade, you need that USD to be really nice and high, right? Um, so that's the issue going on. So interesting to see the response here from China. They're obviously the biggest X factor. Another X factor being India, although India and Russia are buddies. So they seem to be kind of a little bit, I don't know. They're in an interesting position as well.